What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. I am joined today by ConnerDoesRugby, a fantastic YouTuber as well, who is very knowledgeable on all things Scotland. I, of course, know all things Wales, so we're going to be going over the Scotland versus Wales game. I'm not going to lie, when we first set up to do this, I definitely thought it was going to be a bit more about talking about a hard-fought, close score, single score sort of game where inevitably Wales somehow managed to come back and win. It was sort of the opposite of that, so it's going to be a much harder conversation for me. But thank you for joining me, Connor, today.
This will be an easy conversation for me, I think.
Yeah, well, I was hoping it was going to be a bit more like positives and negatives. It's going to be a little bit more positives for you, negatives for me, maybe, to go over. So, going into this game, of course, when we first started out this one, we initially thought this was potentially going to be a preview video. We've moved on to a review video. So, from the team that was named, I can't think how many changes actually were in for the Scotland team from the team that played England. I know Wales made a lot of changes. What did you think of the sort of initial team that was announced to play this Wales team?
I think it was just one change. It was Xander Fagerson came in for VP now.
Yeah.
That was the only change. So, yeah, I was pretty happy with it. I didn't really see there was much reason to change anything from the week before because we played pretty well down at Twickenham.
No, I think
I don't really know what I would have changed. Yeah,
I think the team was pretty solid. The big one was I did wonder whether they might have changed Hugh Jones back out for Chris Harris. Maybe they would have gone back to that. But as we know now, that was absolutely the right call to leave them in. The Wales team, on the other side of things, came up with a kind of mega amount of changes. There was a lot of bad press that came around from the old guard, some of the older boys slowing down in the Ireland game towards the end. So they put on a lot of the new blood, hoping they made a bit of an impact. And looking back at it, I feel like the younger players actually played quite well against this Scotland team. They certainly have areas to work on. I felt a bit sorry for Rio Dyer in parts, getting screamed at on the pitch. But for the majority, I thought, Joe Hawkins, Tommy Raffel, Christian, they sort of performed quite admirably, to be fair, against a Scotland team that is currently firing on all cylinders. Sorry, you go on, Cara.
I felt for Wales, it was some of the older players who didn't really step up properly, like Liam Williams getting a yellow card. Dan Bigger screaming at younger players on the pitch because they threw a pass at them.
Yeah, it's weird. There's been a lot of talk around that about the sort of impact that has as well. Confidence players. I mean, the big talking point a number of years ago was about Alex Cuthbert and the sort of things he was going through with confidence and that stuff. Younger players coming up with talent. I mean, you take a look at the stats and stuff and see that people like Rio Dyer are topping the charts for Wales in terms of like meters made. And actually defenders beaten, like they're actually topping the charts. So sort of screaming and shouting at them for making little mistakes isn't going to really help these lads improve. They have the talent, if anything, getting behind them. It was one of the things I noticed throughout this game was how much Scotland were sort of pepping each other up, high-fiving, getting all excited. Someone was doing something good, they were supporting each other, something went wrong. Tap on the back, no worries, keep going. But it felt like Wales, to me, on the other side of it, were doing just that. They were like attacking whoever got something wrong, screaming at each other. No one looked happy. No one was supporting each other. It was sort of more of a team of individuals that all happened to be playing the same game.
Yeah, it definitely felt like Scotland was more of a team working together a lot more. And relying on their team effort, sprinkled in with some of the quality that Finn Russell brings and players like that. But they weren't relying on those players to step up and do something.
No, I was just very, very impressed by how well they were all working together. So in terms of the actual match, then we'll talk about the first half and what was going on there. Now the halftime whistle, it didn't look too bad. The scoreline, I was sort of hopeful about. I have had to go back and rewatch the game, which was painful to do, but I did go and do it today because it is, of course, it's about 5 days now since the game, and I've tried to black that out forever. But the halftime whistle didn't look like a terrible scoreline difference, and actually watching it back, there are a few more positives about the Wales performance than I thought there were watching it live. I actually thought they held out for longer than I remembered. They held out actually into the second half for a good chunk. But yeah, like you said, Scotland just appearing more as a team in this game, and they really got sort of underway on a better foot. Even though Wales had possession, just not taking the the opportunities in the first half for me is what was really letting them down compared to Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, talking about not taking opportunities, Wales could have gone into the halftime in the lead right at the end of that first half.
Yeah, with another Rio Dyer unfortunate mistake. Well, as I was sort of watching back through the games, I mean, the first 10 minutes or so, actually, I was quite surprised by just how much Wales were on top. They were moving forwards. They were getting into that 22 a number of times, and there were some interesting stats to sort of pull away from that. That in the first 20 minutes, the Wales had 4 ventures into the Scottish 22 and came away with 0 points. Meanwhile, the Scottish team got there once and came away with 6. You know, just taking those opportunities when they arose, and I just feel like Wales, you know, just couldn't find that extra bit or just didn't take the opportunity. But Scotland were doing very well at just ticking over that scoreboard and really sort of helping themselves out, just keep getting the momentum going forwards in the game.
Yeah, sort of continuing from the week before, where I think was it at Twickenham we had 4.1 points per 22 entry, and they sort of kept that number up. I think this week it was 4 points per 22 entry, which is where Wales had less than 1.
I mean, it's one of the things that sort of isn't talked about enough in rugby. It's just taking the opportunities for points, because if you talk about that, so you take 4 points, you win the game. We know the final score here, 35-7. It's a massive score for Scotland by the end of it, averaging 4 points a venture. It's something I spoke about a bit on the channel before about why teams don't take more drop goals and penalties just when they arise to themselves. If you imagine every time you got into the 22, you just took a 3 points, drop goal, you got it over. There, you're almost at the scoreline of what Scotland scored in this match.
Yeah, well, how many was it? How many entries did Wales have in the 22 again? It was quite a few. I think it was 14 maybe.
Yeah, they got there.
That Wales had in the game
a lot. I think by the end of the first half, there was 2 entries for Scotland by the end of the first half and 7 for Wales. They went in at halftime down, which, you know, is just sort of inexcusable in terms of, you know, a coaching standard. You just wouldn't ever want to see that from the players. Talking about then the opportunity Scotland did take. Obviously, it took a little bit of a while for us to actually see the first score get on the board. The first score coming in from the boots of Finn Russell, but it actually began a little bit earlier. A fantastic break by Hugh Jones, which came off of a partnership that's working very well at the minute for Scotland. This Tui Pelotu, Hugh Jones partnership in that centre, is that for you now the main centre partnership you want to see in the Scotland team?
The Huey Pelotu.
The Huey Pelotu, I love it.
Yeah, because I think they're playing together at Glasgow as well, so they've got really good cohesion in that position, in those positions. And yeah, I think Hugh Jones stepped up his defensive play a lot more. That maybe come from him playing fullback when he was down at Harlequins for a bit, and getting better reading defenses and just better at tackling in general. So I think that's really helped him get into that spot and take it off of Harris, because he was always in there because of his defense. And I think that break sort of showed like the real danger of those two along with Finn Russell, because they ran that play of Finn Russell running around the back with Hugh Jones sort of making the run forward a few times, and Wales just didn't know what to do with it. They were, for that first one, they were expecting the ball to go to Russell, and that's what allowed the break. And later on in the game, the ball was going to Russell, and they had to stop back in case of the Hugh Jones break as well. And it just really seemed to struggle with those 3 in that midfield.
Yeah, it's working very well. I didn't actually realise till I watched it back. I did think Chris Harris came on for Hugh Jones, but he actually didn't. He came on for Tui Pelotu later on in that game. And even right up till the end, Hugh Jones is still tackling very hard. There's one instance actually towards the Scottish try line, and he made one tackle, got back out of that one, and then was actually the person who made the next tackle on the try line again. And like you said, the defensive work from him has really stepped up. I've always thought of Hugh Jones as the attacking threat, and it was Chris Harris was the defensive one, and that's the sort of decision you're making. Hugh Jones becoming a bit of the full package at the minute in terms of what he did. But he did like that break against England. It's just the same thing. That little pop pass. I mean, there was discussion around whether the pass was forward. I've watched it a couple of times. I don't know what you think about whether it was a slightly forward pass.
Yeah,
maybe slightly biased from my end. Maybe I want it to be forwards. Maybe that's what I'm thinking. But an absolutely fantastic line, and just carved Wales open, and Wales seem to really be struggling at the minute. I've noticed for the last year and a half that the scramble defense from Wales is quite poor at the minute. As soon as the line breaks, all hell sort of breaks loose, and we sort of saw it after Hugh Jones makes that breakaway. Wales into scramble action. They managed to shut it down, but as seems to be a bit of a theme now with Wales, the only way to seem to actually stop an attack that's broken away from you is just give penalties away. And that is exactly what we saw. That's how Finn Russell got that first points of the game was coming from that penalty. I can't actually remember what the first penalty was off the top of my head. What actually gave it away? I think it might have been for a player not rolling away.
It was either that or it was offside. I can't remember. There was one of those two. Because he kicked the ball. Because Finn kicked the ball out wide to Kyle Steyn, which is something he did quite a lot in the game. Yeah. And he passed it back in, and it might be something like, I think it was players tracking back, maybe, whereas we're offside.
Going out there. Because I remember Wyn Jones found himself out on the wing trying to somehow battle Kyle Steyn. That's not the man I would be having out on the wing, but I thought he did pretty well, to be fair, to cope with it. But yeah, the crossfield kicking from Finn all day was a little bit devastating. The second points that go on the board were also from Finn, from the boot, again from a Wales penalty, and again from a sort of breakaway play. Wales on the scramble, just sort of desperately trying to get over it. That one came from Ken Owens, I think it was, that got done for a jackal penalty that went slightly awry. And I did have a look back at that one a little bit, and I think that one was slightly harsh against him. I sort of see how the referee came to the decision. I believe he said that the hands went beyond the ball and was sort of dragged back onto it. I thought it was quite close, but I can absolutely see how the ref got that one, and Finn took that one as well. So taking Scotland to that 6-0 lead. But at this point, it's important to mention the fact that Wales, as we get towards that 20-minute marker, Scotland have only actually got into the Welsh 22 once. They've come away with the 6 points. They took the opportunities. They're playing the game very well. Good game management. But Wales, as we get towards that 20-minute marker, actually get to 5 occasions where they actually get into the Scottish 22 before they attempt to go for points. They had a penalty earlier on, which they turned down points at the post and went for the corner maul, which was a tactic Wales seemed to use as the solitary tactic now at scoring points. But Scotland defended that one extremely well and actually sort of shut that one down. And there was a couple of other issues for the set piece for Wales, with Ken Owens' line-outs not particularly good for them, whereas Scotland at the minute, the set piece seems to be working extremely well for them.
Yeah, I think it was the set piece was in the 90% or something for that game.
Yeah,
which was fun. Yeah,
and I think
last Six Nations we had a good line out, and then in the summer and in autumn, it was pretty rubbish. And it seems to have come good again in the Six Nations. So
George Turner in this game was fantastic. I did try and look at where the lineouts went wrong, and I actually think the only lineouts that didn't go as planned was only during George Turner being off with his yellow card, which of course we'll talk about in a little bit. But I actually think George Turner was 100% in lineouts. I think it was only when substitutions came on it sort of changed that a bit. But so many just solid jumpers in the lineout, and defensively the lineout for Scotland working incredibly well in this game as well. So speaking of set pieces, going awry or going well, of course, about the 19th minute we had a situation where Wales actually went on the attack. They actually looked like they were making ground. They sort of lost track of where they were going. Josh Adams kicks the ball on. Duan van der Merwe manages to sort themselves up and gets taken back over his own try line. This leads to a Wales 5-metre scrum. And this sort of falls in a little bit what we were talking about earlier with Wales not taking the opportunities. This scrum went completely wrong for Wales in terms of they got the ball out of there. Scottish scrum held up extremely well. And Dan Biggar got pinged for just completely running in offside on the scrum as the ball was being passed out.
Yeah, that's really basic stuff to have an error for. Just being offside at a scrum is something you really shouldn't be being, because it's quite obvious when the ball where you're no longer offside at that point, and they just completely let Scotland off the hook. A good kick, because I thought the attack wasn't amazing, but it was a really good kick from Josh Adams that put them through and put Duhan under pressure. and they just didn't take advantage of it at all, just from really, really silly errors, which was something that happened, I think, throughout large parts of the game in that first half.
Yeah, I mean, there was another one with the attacking maul they had, and it was, the maul went wrong for them. We had another attacking line out. Ken Owens' throw in didn't go straight, and all these little issues and penalties and stuff given away. You've got Scotland under the pressure, and it seemed to me that Wales just decided to throw it away, and you don't really gain anything. And meanwhile, you think a 5 meter scrum, it's a fantastic scoring opportunity, and it's just never gonna come for them if you can't get on the right side of the ref and the right side of the basic rules. And Dan Biggar was one of them, to be fair. Throughout a lot of the game, Dan Biggar got caught quite a few times for silly mistakes or not getting stuff done. The Rio Dyer pass, which was a situation where Rio Dyer was stuck in his own 22, tried to pass it back to Biggar, wasn't the best pass in the world, but I feel like Dan Biggar still probably could have caught that one. He still maybe could have just positioned himself a little bit better for that kick. He sort of screamed at Rio Dyer for that one. He had the scrum. Dan Biggar runs in offside, gives Scotland the easy exit for that. So sort of moving on from the first game Wales had, where the old guard were the ones getting blamed. They brought in all these new players. Some of the issues still coming from the experience, the veterans, the ex-captains of the Wales team, and all these things just massively helping Scotland out along the way. In terms of the first try, then, what did we think of the first try as it was going on?
Well, I was at the game, and so when he first went over, I didn't think it was a try originally because it looked held up initially, and then he just managed to get the ball down, and I think it was given as held up on the field, and then they checked it. But yeah, it was just quite a good maul try, with George Turner breaking off and breaking through over the line, probably getting that little bit of luck to be able to get the ball down.
But yeah, well, the maul is a very interesting thing in this game because it seemed like both teams actually have a very powerful maul at the minute. And the attacking side of the maul, of course, we saw both hookers in this game, both getting tries. But defensively, Wales seemed to be weaker on the defending the maul. The Scottish maul was incredibly good at being able to actually wheel a little bit around the outside, and you saw so many of the Wales players just running into offside positions or getting dragged off the ball. I thought it was a really well worked try from Scotland. I'm sure it'll be something we'll be looking forward to see next week when they go on to play France, because that could be a game where scoring those sorts of tries is going to be absolutely necessary. So talking of George Turner, of course, he just scored his try. We get to have the kickoff. We move back up the other side of the pitch. The kickoff for Scotland, in terms of retaining the ball from the kickoff, for the majority of the game, they got the ball back, but there were a couple of loose kickoffs in this game. They necessarily didn't go to hand. You were at the game. You got to see it. There was a couple of times, especially when we were watching it on the television coverage, where we were busy watching a replay of some scoring or some trying. We didn't actually get to see the kickoff for a big majority of it. You will have seen what happened in that kickoff. Was it more to do with players out of position? Is it players missing the catch itself? What was going on from the retention at kickoff?
I'm not sure. Scotland just traditionally seem to be really bad at accepting kickoffs. So I think they went short and just competed for it. I can't 100% remember from real time, but it was probably something like that.
You have those little bouncy balls. Unless you're kicking it to Matt Fagerson, and he can just run it up the side of the pitch. It's no one knows who's going to take that one. So after scoring the try, we get to see George Turner only 2 minutes later go off with his yellow card. Now this was for a high tackle on George North, which has some areas of discussion around it. Now, I don't know what your opinion on this yellow card is. I'm quite intrigued to hear what you think about this yellow card.
Bit weird. I mean, I understand why the yellow card's given, because of all the protocols around head contact. But it seems a bit weird to call it a high tackle when George North's head was at halfway down to the ground. And I feel like George Turner was bent at the hips. He was wrapping to make a tackle, and it's more the actions of the attacking player that's why he's hit him in the head. And it does feel a bit weird to give a defending player a yellow card because the attacking player's dipped. But I understand why it's been given, and that you need to be careful around players' head contacts. And I mean, there's people saying it was a swinging arm. I don't think it was a swinging arm. I think he was wrapping to make a tackle, and George North's head was there. But what was more concerning was that North didn't immediately go off. there was a passage of play before he went off for his HIA, and then he came back on as well, I think, later.
Yeah, there was a couple of weird things going on with this one. So starting out with the tackle itself, I've been a little bit outspoken on the channel about the tackle laws and the way people are getting carded now. There was one the Wales suffered last week against Ireland against Liam Williams for Johnny Sexton coming from a rising position and then a shoulder hit head, and that one was a bit more. I understood that Liam Williams was standing upright and a shoulder has made contact with the head. This one is the same sort of thing though, where I sort of agree exactly with you. The actual attacker is low to the ground. They're already sort of in a dangerous position. And if the attacker was standing upright, running with the ball in two hands, that tackle is a great shot to the stomach or to the ribs, and it would be a standard tackle. And the attackers almost put themselves in a bad position. When I saw it the first time, I was like, oh, he's obviously caught him in the head. The head protocols will come in now. Watching it back, I actually didn't hear the first time watching it live. The ref agreed it's not a swinging arm. Which I thought was the only reason it was a yellow card, because I agree with you. I think the player is dipped. He literally has one of his knees on the ground at the time that the contact is made. And I think George North actually looks over his own shoulder to see where George Turner's coming from, which I think if he doesn't look at where he's coming from, that ends up being a bit of a barrel shunting tackle. You're just sort of scooping him off the ground. I think George Turner got unlucky. So I agree with that they mitigated it from a red down to a yellow. Well, I thought the yellow card was still it's still a swinging arm as opposed to maybe a wrap, and you've made contact to the head, therefore it would be a yellow. But the ref actually in this game said to George Turner, it's not a swinging arm, and that's why it's only a yellow. So I'm still not entirely sure what the punishment was. A bar, you made some contact with the head, therefore it's a default yellow card, and I'm not a massive fan of that being in rugby.
Yeah, I feel like if it's just any time someone hits someone's head, regardless to where their head is, if I was a player, I'd be thinking, well, if I put my head here and someone hits it, I could give my team an advantage. And I don't think that stops head injuries from happening, which is what all these protocols are around.
Yes, well, I think the concept of it being it's to avoid head injuries, concussions, and this is what we're quite hardline on. I fully agree with you. If you're going to say, so it's any contact to the head, one that's always sort of befuddled me is the pick and goes, where you literally have a prop tuck the ball under your chest and your neck, a lock is behind you, shoving you forwards face first into two other props who are going to clatter you on the try line. And there's a head contact in that every single pick and go nearly. And that is fine, and it's seemingly not many people ever seem to get knocked out on a pick and go. But those types of contact don't feel that different to this. Personally, for me, I would like to see something different here about the head contact rule. I would like it to be, if head contact is made, you start off at, it's a red card, head contact's been made. Look at it as, what's the mitigation for the defender, as there is now, mitigated down to a yellow card. I personally would quite like it if there was an extra stage then where they say, is there any mitigation against the attacker? Have they put themselves in a dangerous position? Have they tried to avoid the dangerous position? Are they standing up with the ball at their hip and they've got hit in the head? Was there any reason for the defender to be hitting there? Or are they allowing themselves to be hit in the head? And I think that would have, maybe you could mitigate that from a yellow down to a penalty. And you'd say, yeah, you've hit him in the head. You shouldn't hit him in the head. But, you know, the attacker should be more aware to not just stick your head in. I completely agree with you that I feel like you might start seeing every time someone runs with the ball, you just stick your head down and just earn yourself a yellow card for you and the team.
Yeah, I think that's quite a good idea. They do it a bit where they talk about like the dip, like a late dip or an early dip, and they did it there. They did it for that one, and they said he was a late dip, I think, and that I think that's why it went from down from a red to a yellow.
To a yellow.
It's like the late dip is how he hit him in the head. So how do you start at a red and go down to a yellow because of the late hit when the late dip? Sorry, is why he's hit him in the head.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about. And then, of course, the second thing, exactly as you mentioned, the HIA thing. Now, so we sort of skipped out at the start. Of course, Stuart Hogg went off earlier on for his HIA, which, having watched it back, I'm still not entirely sure what happened to him. He seemed to go into a tackle. He seemed to be fine in the tackle, and a ruck went over the top of him. And obviously, something happened in that ruck. It's not really shown the best on the TV coverage. But he never came back. He never came back for whatever his injury was, and he seemed to be relatively lucid in the on the bench, and he was cheering the team on. He came straight back out. He sat down, watched the game. But I fully agree with you, George North. George North to me actually looks like the arm of George Turner. Although I don't really agree it was a swinging arm. His arm is technically swinging, and did catch him in the chin. I think he just caught him correctly, and it looked to me like George North was knocked out. It looked to me like he actually goes limp directly afterwards. And I don't know how anyone allows him to stay on the field as soon as that happens.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if someone's knocked out, they're not even meant to have a HIA, they're just straight off.
Yeah.
They don't even do an assessment. And it's weird because I don't really know what happened with Hogg. I know he had like some blood or something on his face. But yeah, he never came back on, and he looked fine, like obviously not fine enough to play, but he was able to move around. He was pretty active on the sidelines, and then North just looked like he was completely out.
Yeah, I even after he came back on, I was quite surprised to see him back on. I think there was 3 penalties given away by North later on in the game, and all of them, maybe I'm reading a bit too much into it, I think most of them are for general game awareness things. He got caught offside for 2 of them, and I think another one was at the breakdown where he just seemed to the ref was telling him to leave it and he just carried on going. I think, is he actually paying that much attention? Does he know where he is? Does he realise he's offside? Has he taken a head knock? I've had head collisions. If you've grown up in school, you've been playing a game of rugby, so I've been hit in the head. It takes a long time for your body to sort of adjust to it. So I sort of agree with that. I don't think he should have been allowed to stay on. It might even be something to look at when we were talking about the yellow card situation for a high tackle. Did the player have to leave the field for a HIA? Maybe if they did, you are sort of pushed more towards a yellow card. If actually they've remained on the field and they're fine, medics come on, they said, nope, they're cool to play on. Maybe that would almost be another mitigation for dropping down a card to a penalty to say, okay, you've caught him high, but no damage done. Be more careful, penalty, as opposed to maybe a yellow card. I'm not sure how they'd enforce those rules, and I'm sure there'd probably be loads of things proving otherwise. But, you never see how they'll get on with that. So after the yellow card came in, we saw a couple of compound issues from Scotland coming in, which inevitably led to Wales's only score. I was going to say first score, the only score of the game. Now, there was the opportunity. They had the penalty directly in front of the posts. They turned down the posts, which probably the smart move, a man up on the field. They could have gone for the scrum maybe, but didn't want to bring the man on. Went for the driving maul. And Ken Owens goes over for his try, also converted by Dan Biggar. So we pull back to 13-7. A well-worked maul. What do you think of the Scottish defensive maul in this game?
I think neither team defended that great from the maul.
Yeah,
we were obviously a man down in the forwards, so Wales would have an advantage right on your line. You would expect Wales to score that, given that situation. Yeah. I think overall it was all right.
It seemed to be that. I remember it being a maul where it felt like it was definitely solid, but then began to creak, and it's probably exactly that missing one extra player just sort of gives way, and unfortunately Wales there just sort of managing to get a score. I'm glad Ken Owens did get over for a score. I'm glad Wales didn't just end this game on 0. Positive about that. Now, just before halftime, of course, we had one last final scoring opportunity, which somehow went completely awry. The Wales attack getting on the front foot. George North has gone off finally with his HIA. Cuthbert's come onto the field, and Cuthbert actually making quite a nice impression in this game. Actually making a couple of good meters from coming on his little segments of playing on. But it was actually Cuthbert that started out that initial break, finding a room in the Scottish defence that's held out very well for the majority of the game up to that point. And we saw the ball spread out wide, and then we had Dan Biggar with his little round the back pass out to Rio Dyer, slightly missed, and the ball bobbled into touch. How did you feel from a Scottish player? Was that like a bit of a let off? Did you feel that actually there was a try coming at that point?
Well, first of all, I think there was a big try-saving tackle from Richie Gray on Cuthbert there, which I realized it was Richie Gray watching it back, which I wasn't expecting the big second row to make that tackle. And then yeah, I remember when I was in the stadium watching it because I was right on that try line. It was on the other side of the pitch, but I was right on that line. And I just remember having my head in my hands and then looking up and realizing they hadn't
They
scored.
hadn't scored.
I just
Brilliant.
assumed, I just assumed Wales had scored, but before they'd done it.
No,
Yeah.
it was very very unlucky for Rio Dyer. Unfortunately, an afternoon where Rio Dyer played well in big sections, and it just feels such a shame for him that these little things
Mhm.
just slip through your hands. Again, of course, it has to be a pass from Dan Biggar to him, so there's another issue for him to deal with. But so Wales not managing to get the score there. So we went in at halftime on that 13-7 score line. Now, the actual stats were massively in favour of Wales, and it really surprised me sort of looking back at it. Possession was 59%, territory was 70% to Wales. We sort of already mentioned about the ventures into the 22, 2 for Scotland, 7 to Wales. They've come away with that one score in 7 visits, and the points per entry at that point were averaging out. It was just over 5 for Scotland and 1 for Wales. And like you said, that sort of continued just for the rest of the game, and we just sort of saw that scoreline begin to get away from them. But from a Scottish perspective, that's got to be a very positive first half, considering not having a lot of the ball or a lot of territory still coming away with the score and from every venture into the 22.
Yeah, it was fairly positive, but because I was feeling that we hadn't had a lot of the ball and a lot of territory, that I was starting to think that maybe Wales were just gonna sort of push forward in that second half and keep moving in. And I was like, they can't keep missing every chance in the 22. I mean, turns out they did, but uh, and yeah, I was starting to get really nervous at that point, thinking, oh no, not again, Scotland leading early on in a game, 30-0 up, and then just end up losing it in the second half.
Which
But
does
yeah,
happen. We've seen it in Wales. We've seen going back to the Wales France game from a couple of years ago and watching Corey Hill go straight off his feet only for France to come back and win that game. I'll never forget that one. Losing a game that you should win from that point is painful to have to suffer through. So on to the second half then. Now the second half scoreline really blows up for Scotland. Scotland get a number of scores in the second half. I'm thinking about the game after it. I really felt like it was Scotland was the entire second half, but actually it took Scotland a good while to actually really get on that front foot. Wales actually really held out this game, I think, right up until the sort of 50-minute marker. They actually played well. It was still in Wales' possession. They were still making ground. More penalties were coming up against Scotland. I seem to remember the Schoeman high tackle on, I think it was Rafael or Jack Morgan, just giving Wales some easy exits and allowing them to get back up the field. But we need to talk about, of course, the try that came in, which a lot of people have been looking at, the Kyle Steyn first try, which was a lovely try by him, and it's nice to see him scoring again because he had such a good debut, and Kyle Steyn's been off the radar a bit for me since being in that international jersey. But it was that infamous back pass from Finn Russell. Yeah. Who got into this half so much more, which from a Scottish perspective, seeing Finn Russell play it like that high level must be a fantastic feeling to watch a fly half just do all these incredible things.
Yeah, it's amazing, especially like when you go back to sort of the mid-2000s when our fly halves, all they did was kick the ball away. So you have a guy like that who does all this stuff. It's really great to watch. Yeah, that try was pretty amazing. I think Wales were down to 14. I think Liam Williams had just been sent off before that.
He's still on at this point. The penalty count's beginning to rise because he got dinged for just being the guy that ended up on too many penalty counts. He was still on at this point. This was just Scotland being amazing. And actually sort of breaking through. But the penalty count was the rise of it. In fact, if I remember rightly, this actually all started from a Wales lineout in their own 22. Went to Rye, Scotland doing very well in that lineout situation, stealing the ball, and then there was compound penalties by Wales that allowed Scotland to move all the way up the other side of the field and actually led to a score. And it's another one of those situations where basic things going wrong for Wales ends up costing them so much in this game. You know, getting line-outs wrong, conceding penalties in mauls and in silly locations, places where you're on the attack, suddenly does a little bit of a flip and just falls back on you. When people like Finn Russell are playing at a high level, they just become your worst nightmare as a defensive team to try and deal with. You and me had a little bit of chat before we got into this. We were both a little bit surprised when we were talking about the. I think both of our memories might have been that Finn Russell was actually playing extremely well for the whole game. But actually, the first half, Finn Russell was getting shut down a little bit. His kicks weren't going particularly well. He had a grubber kick get charged down. He wasn't necessarily feeling into the game. But the second half is where we really see him get into. So that first try coming in with the lovely little out the back door pass going to Kyle Steyn, getting over his try, was the first of 3 try assists from Finn Russell. You really can't ask a lot more of a fly half than being able to achieve that. Moving on from the actual try, talk about the kicking that actually happened from Finn Russell, because the kicking in open play looked very good. He was getting a nice little crossfield kicks. He was always putting Wales under a lot of pressure. The kicking to posts was relatively good for the majority of the game. It did go slightly awry in a couple of instances, missed a couple of kicks throughout the game. What's your view on, because obviously Stuart Hogg went off, Blair Kinghorn went on and had a good game. I thought Kinghorn had a good game. What would your view have been on maybe if Finn Russell began to miss kicks, having someone else take over the kicking duties and having Finn stay at 10, but have someone else do kicking maybe with a slightly higher kicking percentage? Or are you happy with how Finn Russell performs in terms of the kicking towards posts?
I'm happy with Finn kicking because the only other person I could think of is Kinghorn, who could be a kicker. And, we lost against Australia because he missed a kick right at the end of the game. So, and he doesn't kick regularly for Edinburgh either. Buffelli does that. So Finn Russell's really the only regular kicker in that team. So there isn't really anyone else to kick.
Yeah,
if he wasn't kicking.
I mean, Hogg's got a boot on him that could do it. I mean, we've seen Hogg play fly half before and wasn't terrible by any means. He actually played relatively okay and kicking towards post. He did a good job. I think Finn Russell's still got to be your number 1 kicker. And he did have some hard kicks, to be fair, in this game. There were some right on the touchline kicks that he had to deal with in this one. So you can't be too harsh. I think he only missed one against England, didn't he? I think the only one he missed actually hit the post as well. So I think overall he's got a relatively good kicking percentage. Well, speaking of Finn Russell, and he really got into the second half compared to that first half. Another player that did the same was Duhan van der Merwe, who in the second half just exploded onto the pitch. I mean, we saw what he did against England in that Calcutta Cup. Was a little bit quiet in the first half, hadn't quite got into the game. But in that second half, just finding the room beginning to open up. He's making some good room down that left wing. Josh Adams has taken a bit of a knock to the ribs earlier on in the game, so he's not really defending that wing as best he should do. And he was actually one of the main catalysts in terms of allowing Scotland to move up. By the end of the game, it was 150 metres made for Duhan van der Merwe, which is pretty extraordinary stuff. But obviously, if you saw the Calcutta Cup game, you saw his 2 tries. That boy can run, he can make the meters up, which inevitably led Scotland to be in the Wales 22. The penalty counts beginning to grow, and we get to see the Liam Williams yellow card, second yellow card in 2 games for him. Again, it feels like harsh on both counts. The first one against Sexton was a bit like, oh man, that felt a bit harsh against him. And this one, again, it wasn't necessarily that he was doing the most things wrong out of anyone in the team. It was just more the team themselves beginning to build up those penalties, and it actually led to Liam Williams getting that yellow card for just being the guy on the end of them, to be honest. But up to then, I did think Liam Williams was having quite a good game.
Yeah, he was doing pretty decent. I wasn't watching him that much, but I think before Scotland's first score, I think he got the turnover. But obviously there was a penalty given away earlier, so he was quite good. I mean, for 15, he was quite good in and around the ruck area. But at this point, I think that's why he was pinged for being off feet. At that point.
He certainly dives in. He's certainly one of the players that tries to do the vast saving thing right at the end. He does go for it. I don't think it's a terrible attempt, to be fair. Actually, sort of watching it back in terms of him going for the jackal. I think the opportunity was there. Adam Beard made the tackle, and it was there. But he does rather than go for the ball, he went completely beyond the ball and immediately rested on his elbows. It's absolutely a penalty. And then off the back of that yellow card, Scotland, of course, go for this kick to the corner. They go for that driving maul, and we get to see Finn Russell go for try assist number 2. out to Kyle Stain, try number 2, with a wonderfully weighted crossfield kick. What do you think about that try?
Yeah, that was great. I think that was right in front of me at the stadium. So I got a very good view of it, and yeah, it's just a very well weighted kick right into Stain's hands. Like the only thing I could say negative was that Stain had to stop running to catch it. He managed to get over and score the try, and it was very, very, very nicely taken.
Oh yeah, and of course with that man down as well, having that extra room. I mean, there was talk around whether should Rio Dyer have been in a better position, but the way the Wales defence was sort of set up, it was so narrow compared to it. Obviously, they expected maybe the big driving maul to come. They've already scored 1 try from it. Wales are trying to set up for it. They've actually got 4 defenders on 4 Scottish defenders looking at it now. 2 Wales defenders are behind the maul, obviously waiting to sort of engage. It's Rio Dyer 1 outside marking Kinghorn, and it just is a factor of there's 1 extra man. So unless you're going to expect Rio Dyer to somehow cover 30 metres of the pitch, somehow covering both Kyle Stain and Blair Kinghorn, both of which are very fast, very talented players, I don't know how you're possibly going to stop both of them. But Rio Dyer did actually get back to Kyle Stain. I'm not sure if he could have done a better tackle. I feel like the try was certainly coming for him. But another superb score for Scotland. They're taking them to 3. Now, Finn Russell missed that kick afterwards, but they're already at an 18-point lead. So after Scotland have scored that one, Wales needed to do something to get back into the game. They went more on the offensive, and it was one of the better portions of attack from Wales in terms of actually being able to get up the field, actually made some ground. Mistakes coming in from Scotland. There was a couple of penalties going against like Jamie Ritchie, which just giving Wales a few extra metres, and we actually ended up with a scrum on Scotland's 5-metre line. Now, this was one of the situations where another one where you just sort of feel like a try has to come here for me for this Wales team. There's the set piece already hasn't allowed them to sort of get the most out of this game, but the position they're in, you're pretty much under the posts. You've got 4 players to one side. You've got your scrum half to run at the other. Now, at this point, Rhys Webb had come on for Wales, and I really think Thomas Williams was doing a little bit better in terms of the way they were dealing with the set piece. Rhys Webb takes the ball. He decides to run to the right-hand side of the scrum, which I actually think was the correct call, but then shifts the ball back the other way. But I think too quick to actually mean anything. And it's sort of a thing that actually happened throughout this team for Wales. For the majority of the game, they seem to be having plans and set plays where they knew what they wanted to do, but they were actually doing them slightly too early for Scotland to bite or to do anything with them. When we think back to the first half with Hugh Jones and Tui Pelotu with a little pop pass. Tui Pelotu's eyes are looking somewhere else. It's absolutely fantastic. No one thinks Hugh Jones is carving that line. But Wales on the other side of things just seem to be getting it wrong for me. They're not really organising themselves in such a way that the defence is buying what they're doing. And this was sort of the perfect example that they switched it the other way. Scotland immediately shut it down with Joe Hawkins not making any room. They go further outside, and Rhys Carey does eventually get through. And does get stopped by Matt Fagerson on a wonderful tackle, forcing a wonderful knock-on, which I just thought was a superb cover tackle. But how did you think about the Scottish defence on their own 5-metre from those set-piece situations? How do you think they were holding up throughout the game?
So yeah, Scotland's defence was really, really good throughout the whole game, and it was really good the week before as well. We had been building a really strong defence for a couple of years under Steve Tandy, and last year it seemed to really falter and really sort of slip down in standards, but it seems to have come back up. I think it was a 92% tackle success rate in this game.
Yeah, there was
really, really good.
I'm trying to find the actual stats that we had by the end of the game. The tackle missed was 9 for Scotland by the end of the game compared to Wales's 28. And Scotland actually made more tackles throughout the game as well. So they actually had a much better percentage thing. But Scotland's defence organisation, I just thought was so well worked. There were so many times we saw them in this game where they just sort of almost held back. It's one of the things I've really come to appreciate about the Scottish setup now is the ability to just absorb things. If they're under pressure on attack, they absorb the attack. They're building the defence up. But a lot of times they actually sort of just let the attack do what they're doing. They don't commit men. They just drift along with the passes, and you watch the ball go out wide. And Wales, as I sort of mentioned before, but they're getting caught out on these set plays. The ball's spreading out wide, but going 2-3 of the men further down the line, but no one's made a tackle. All you've done is shifted the ball from one side of the field to the other. I think Scotland have improved dramatically in just being able to not need to commit, but then you've got so many good players in Scotland in the jackal. You're waiting for the tackle to be made, and then the turnover penalties can just start sort of flourishing away.
Yeah, I feel like, the sort of the flashy defense is like the big rush defense that Sean Edwards does. And Scotland's defense is a bit different to that. I think they do that a bit more in the 22, but in other parts of the pitch, it's a lot more just about absorbing it and almost trying to isolate the attacker to try and let their back row get over the ball and try and win the ball back is what I feel it's kind of like a lot of the time. Which it's quite an interesting style because it's not a lot of teams don't do that. A lot of teams adopt the big rush defense, and so I think a lot of teams maybe aren't fully prepared for them to sort of be there. they're normally expected to sort of have rushed out of the line normally. But yeah, I think at that point in the pitch in the 22, it's a bit more. They come up a bit quicker because you can't really afford to give away the territory at that point. And maybe that threw them off a bit, and the pass just went a bit awry.
Yeah, well, people like Hugh Jones and Tui Pelotu were doing extremely well. It just you could see the defensive line was, as opposed to running up as a line, they were almost running up as a curve. They were just so that they were getting fast off the line, but you found so many Wales players receiving the ball but not being able to shift it further out. They have to take it into contact, and the backs at the point of Scotland now are so defensively minded. We've always spoke about Hugh Jones and Chris Harris. They're not going to be missing tackles. They're going to be making them. And all you've done then is you're stuck on your own. You can't throw the pass. You can't do anything. You've got to go into contact, and people will get over and get those turnover penalties. We saw, a couple of superb tackles by the forwards. That first one by Matt Fagerson on Rhys Carey as he was getting through. That's a try if that doesn't get made. He just is getting a try. After coming on, he had a great game, to be fair, Rhys Carey coming on to the pitch. He definitely gets a try there. And there was one a little bit later on. There was one about 10 minutes later on in the exact same sort of situation. Wales on the offensive. They're going through the one-off runners. They are getting closer to the line. Scotland defending well. And Rhys Carey, again, smashing that line. He's a big lad. He gets through the sort of tackles that was riding through. Two people holding onto him. And who is underneath it yet again? Matt Fagerson just holding onto it. He's come into his own in terms of that number 8 shirt. I really feel like the back row for Scotland has got so much depth. I mean, the fact that Hamish Watson isn't in this side, and it doesn't seem to be missing him. Nothing seems to be going wrong for them. They seem to be very well organised in that back row.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Fagerson he's the unsung hero of this Scotland team. I think last week against England, he made 28 tackles in that game. And I think the record in a game is 31. So that's how many tackles made in that game. And I think this weekend he made 20 tackles. So he's just a workhorse in that back line. He just seems to be everywhere making those tackles. And there's a lot of players like that in the Scotland team. Like Johnny Gray's known for making all of his tackles. Yeah, obviously Hamish Watson wasn't playing, but he's known for that. And Luke Crosby is quite known for just being another workhorse in that back row. And I think they're just working really hard for each other, and that they've become really proud of their defense, I think, and they really don't want teams pushing past them. Whereas maybe a couple of years ago they were more willing to give up. Well, I guess not willing, but they were less proud of it and more wanted to just do the flashy attack. Where now I think they really take pride in their strong defense.
Well, yeah, and just a momentum boost, a confidence boost. If you can defend a 5-meter scrum and you get the turnover from it is that you have your own scrum. That's an enormous confidence boost. That's shattering to a team that you feel like you're on the front foot. You've got the best position, arguably, in rugby to have a scrum almost under the posts. It's almost the best position in rugby to score a try from, and the fact you still can't score anything is so demoralising for the other team that it just puts you on such a front foot. So from that, as we talk about being demoralising, Scotland then immediately moved back up. The confidence shifted back. I bet the stadium was going wild where you were at because Scotland just went back on the front foot. And we lead on to the bonus point try of the game that came in. This one was from Blair Kinghorn, who I don't think we've spoken about much in this game, but I thought played brilliantly. Losing Hogg is normally like a big thing. But in this game, I really feel Blair Kinghorn stepped in. I've seen a couple of different people's different views on Kinghorn. He can play wing, he can play fullback, he's played 10. I thought he sort of grew into fly half a bit when we saw him last year. But with Finn Russell coming back, I still think I would have Finn Russell at 10. But he fills in so well, seamlessly in any position, Blair Kinghorn. I think he's a superb player for Scotland to have. Unfortunately, on the bench, I do think of him as like the super sub of just can play anywhere and play anywhere to a very high standard. But I thought he played in this game very well.
Yeah, he's fantastic, and I think his time at 10s maybe made him a better 15, because I think his reading of the opposition's line, the opposition's like finding space, has gotten a lot better. And I think if you look at that try he scores, you can see, because this try that he scores was the one where Russell chips it over to Van der Merwe, makes the break, and then he chucks it back in to Kinghorn. And you can see, if you watch Kinghorn, you see he looks and sees the gap starting to open up and then calls for the ball. And it's a very, very much kind of a number 10 thing to do, to sort of spot the gap and then get the ball, instead of just get the ball and then see what happens sometimes, is what lots of other players do. And so I think him having played 10 for Edinburgh for the last sort of couple of years, which I think is probably going to be stopping with Edinburgh having signed Ben Healy for next season, is making him a better player in other areas of the pitch.
Yeah, well, I think he's doing extremely well. This game as well, just supporting you, man. When we talk about players coming on from the bench as well, the thing I always look for is, are they going to make an impact into the game? And some people sort of think, well, if you're only on for 10 minutes from the bench, you don't have the opportunity for the game. This one, he came on very early with Hogg going off so early on. You've got to make an impact into the game. But I can imagine there's a situation where some players think, oh, I haven't made the starting team. Maybe you're not part of that starting forwards. Maybe you're not going to be like, oh, I'm not really quite part of this team. But the support play from him in this game as well was awesome. He's always there. He's just always on someone's shoulder. He knows where the room is, like you said. He's waiting for that pass. And this try that sort of came in from that crossfield kick out to Duhan van der Merwe, again, very well weighted again by Finn Russell. But, lovely hands from van der Merwe to pop it over the top. But he's just always on that wing. He knew the position needed to come in. I'm not sure if before this game he would have been told, you're coming on at fullback. I'm not sure where he would have been coming on, because I imagine Hogg would want to play the full 80. He might have even been in training for playing on the wing. So the ability to just come onto the pitch, fit in, and support the team in the way he did, I thought he was absolutely fantastic in this game.
Yeah, he's just there's people even saying that he should start against France instead of Shirt Hogg. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I mean, I wouldn't be upset if he was starting against France.
I mean, I picked Hogg in the fantasy, so I also agree that someone else needs to be there, because Hogg did not score me enough points for me to keep him on, unfortunately. Right then, in terms of the final try of the game then, Scotland have already got the bonus point. They've got the maximum from this game. They decided it wasn't enough. They decided we need to do some record breaking. We need to really put the hammer down. And we get to see Matt Fagerson's try, which, for a man that's played extremely well all game, he's had 2 try-saving tackles. I think he was on 19 out of 20 tackles for the entire game. And then also to get himself a try is just fabulous stuff. This all came off the back of another maul for Scotland. The maul didn't go too well for them. And Scotland actually moved back towards the inside of the field. And by this time, George Horne had come on. Now, there's talk around Ali Price not starting in this team anymore. Ben White seems to be starting. Ben White came off and George Horne came on. And again, I think fit in seamlessly, knew the play was running backwards. He chucked it back up the blind side. And we saw Matt Fagerson go over the try. Who is that starting scrum half for you at this point?
Yeah, George Horne has been playing really well for Glasgow. He's been starting over Ali Price at Glasgow. So that's why he's in that team over Ali Price. And yeah, he put a really good pass in there. And then Finn Russell got the ball. And just a classic looping Finn Russell pass over the top to find Matt Fagerson out on the wing and just getting the try he deserves, really.
Yeah. Well, where else do you want a number 8? Why don't you want a number 8 out on the wing? Again, there's another issue here for me from a Wales standpoint. Is it's a criticism I've had a couple of times, specifically about Cuthbert's defence. Cuthbert does get into this team a lot still, and there's talks about whether he should be in this team as like a starting player, or if he should be in the team anywhere at all. And if I think of Cuthbert, I think of him as very attacking. Defensively, I've always found him a little bit wanting. And one of the big criticisms I've always had about him is when he's defending out on his wing, he doesn't stay on his wing. And I never know what that's about. He always decides to cut inside, almost like trying to shut off the pass. And I feel like teams have just identified this now. I feel like teams get around it. And this is exactly the same thing. The ball goes out. You've got Finn Russell. There's two men. Cuthbert runs massively out of his line to cut in for the second player, and Finn Russell loops it over the top. I mean, in fact, Matt Ferguson didn't even have to have any effort to get over that line at that point. He got over, but what a superb try from him. So at the end of all the scoring, then we did get to that final score, 35-7. Scotland with the bonus point. There was one more piece of action to talk about because Wales went back on the offensive. They didn't want the game to be over. They got all the way up to the Scotland try line, and a penalty went the wrong way. And George Horne decided he wanted to carry on. And he went back up the other side. Now, for you in the stadium, this must have been great. On the TV coverage, we were watching the highlight of the penalty. We didn't even know this has happened. Mm-hmm. Was this the correct call from you here to sort of see what could happen, see if they could go on more, or did you just want kick it out and get it over with?
I mean, I didn't want the game to stop. I was having a great time, but I think if we'd scored another try, we'd be top right now. So maybe that was going through their mind.
Oh, really? I don't actually know that sort of stat, but yeah, that would have been awesome. Because something else that came out of this, which I had to go back and rewatch it a couple of times, because there was another yellow card in this game. Yeah, which no one really talks about. Everyone seems to have missed off, but there was a yellow card that eventually went to Rhys Webb. Who I had to go and look back up who actually got the yellow card before they kicked off the pitch. Not that it changed too much in the game, but just another, inconsistency in the Wales standpoint there. That even though the game is over, one of the first things you ever talked about in rugby training is just don't ever turn your back on the ball. And it's the first thing they all did. They all said, "Oh, penalty, end of the game." Wales turned around. I think it was a great call by George just to see if something would happen. Went for it, got that penalty and the yellow card. I mean, maybe. With 14 men on the field and a penalty, that kick goes to the halfway line. Another crossfield kick to Kyle Steyn. Who knows? Maybe he's away again. Maybe he gets another one. But Scotland did come away with that win. What was your overall thoughts? And overall thoughts on that game, I assume to be positive. I really thought the scoreline would be a bit closer for us to dissect a bit more. It's really just talking about how well Scotland did so far.
Yeah, they were that second half particularly. We were absolutely fantastic. It was, a complete performance, but only in the second half. The first half was a bit more iffy. Letting, we started well, then let Wales back into it the second half of that first half.
First half, yeah.
And but then we just managed to grab the game by the neck and get. And push away from Wales, and it was fantastic being there.
Yeah, I think that was an awesome game. I think they did extremely well. Moving on then, final thing to talk about. Next week, Scotland going up against France. That's a big game. That'll be an exciting one to watch. I'm really looking forward to it. What is your expectations for that one?
I have absolutely no idea at this point. I think it's a game we can win. I think France haven't necessarily been the best they've been in this championship. The last time we played in Paris, we won. That was the game a couple of years ago where we scored right at the end. So, and the last sort of few years against France has sort of been back and forth between the two teams. So it's definitely a game we can win. It's a game, if we will win, I'm not sure.
There's a lot of nuance into that. Now, I did the prediction video before the tournament started, and I thought exactly this thing would happen. I thought Ireland would beat France, and France now knowing the only thing that's going to keep them in this tournament is they just need to now start winning every game. Like they've got to now view that from a further point. Are they going to go for a massive game against Scotland? But sometimes that sort of pressure to know you have to perform can sometimes throw you off. And if you're playing at home, maybe you feel more pressure to try and perform. But Scotland 2 from 2, there's the potential Triple Crown. There's the potential Grand Slam if they can see out 2 tough games in a row. Scotland have come so far in the last few years to. Was it last year or the year before where they almost looked like they were really competing to be in that top 2 spot as well? I just really want to see Scotland perform well. I feel like they're on for a good year this year. I hope they do well against France. Wales, England? Thoughts on that? How do we think that one's going to go?
Well, if you have any players, then because there's been talks of the players going on strike.
Yeah. Well,
regions. So.
You know, people have said they want a younger team with less caps. I mean, it's coming in because we're going to have to start bringing in some of the under-18s or something. I think to actually fill out the squad. Hopefully we'll get there. I'm not sure how confident I'm feeling about that game, to be honest. England did, of course, in their game against Italy, work out their 10-12 situation a little bit better with Ollie Lawrence coming on, and seeing the way that Hugh Jones found room in the midfield against Wales, I feel like Ollie Lawrence might do quite a similar thing.
Yeah, and it'll probably be Slade at 13 as well, so that's quite a dynamic centre partnership. It's quite a
dynamic centre partnership. So I'm not sure about that one, but I'll certainly sit back and enjoy the Scotland-France game. That'd be about where we'll get to. Right, guys, we're going to finish it off there. We've done this video for a lot longer than we expected to. Thank you so much to Connor for joining us today. Make sure you go check out his channel. You can go subscribe over there. He's got some fantastic videos about rugby. Of course, the teams are coming out next week for the games, so we'll be doing the preview videos on the channel. If you enjoyed this one today and you want to see more stuff from me and Connor and doing these sorts of chat videos, make sure you drop this video a like and subscribe to both channels to keep up to date with all the rugby videos as they come out. We'll see you all next time, guys. Bye-bye.